So every Russian soldier attacking right now isn't making it home, and their only chance of survival is to be captured by Ukraine. That's not a normal situation in this war, but this isn't a normal battlefield, and once they move out from Russian lines, there's nowhere to hide. I mean, it's not just Ukrainian drones they have to dodge and take cover from, but freezing temperatures that are taking their toll every day at the front, which is one of the reasons we just kicked off a fundraiser to help 3 different Ukrainian units with vehicles and power generation. More on that later in the video. Now, a Russian father here, Alexander Anorin, just went off on the Russian authorities for not changing their tactics at the front despite the staggering losses they continue to sustain. He says, quote, "So what does this mean? In order for the Russian military to reach at least the Dnipro, they will need to lose 50 million people killed." He noted that over the last 6 months, his son's regiment, his son is missing, was a member of the 102nd Motor Rifle Regiment. He says their losses amounted to 6,000 people, which is equivalent to 3 regiment formations. So that means that they lost an entire regiment, refilled it with all new soldiers, lost it again 3 times over, according to this soldier's father. He pointed out that the regiment's attack sector is 1.5 to 2 kilometers wide, and the advance over 6 months is around 15 kilometers. He calculated that with similar losses along the entire front line, they would amount to up to 3 million people. Now, I'm going to show you the area he's talking about on the map. With those level of casualties, it's understandable that they're fighting in one of the hottest sectors at the front. We've got deep state map up here, and the area he says his son's regiment, the 102nd, was operating in was up here, the Sovivka area, so just to the east of the Dobropilya salient, a little northeast of Pokrovsk. We know this has been the focus of Russian offensive operations for well over a year at this point. He will call out Poltava here in a minute as well, where, in fact, he says this was taken a long time ago, and they still cannot conduct casualty evacuations from here. It's too close to the front. So he kind of argues, what does it even mean that we control this area? He says he talks about the formality of taking populated areas. Flags are installed, but it's impossible to hold positions. The sky remains in the hands of the enemy. Evacuation doesn't work, and soldiers are forced to spend days in basements. He says, yes, I think in September, the 242nd Regiment planted a flag, announced that Poltava was taken. So on the map here, Poltava, right here in the middle of the screen. How much time has passed since then? 4 or 5 months? And in Poltava, evacuation groups still can't work. And this is worth talking about because regularly we look at these gray zones on the map that are contested between the two sides and say, well, maybe it's not fully under the control of Russia or fully under the control of Ukraine, but you can't operate there. What this Russian father is saying is that even area held by Russia, according to these maps, is not really under their control. And to be fair, we're seeing that on both sides of the line, right? Like, I would be surprised if Ukrainian elements 1 or 2 kilometers to the north here are able to operate freely. That's just not the way the battlefield works right now. Realistically, these gray zones extend, depending on the area of the front, between 5 and 20 kilometers in both directions. So across into Ukrainian territory, into Russian territory. The father went on to talk about the fate of his son, who he says was on combat missions for more than 20 days without rotations and went regularly on missions without the necessary equipment, including protection against UAVs. And real quick, to give you an idea of the territory taken, we'll look at a measurement here using the area he's talking about. So if we go, 15 kilometers deep by 2 kilometers wide in terms of the regiment's area, recognizing that the father here says they lost 6,000 soldiers, we'll kind of chart out an area here. We'll include Poltava because that's an area he says his son fought in. And we'll see what the general area we got to get to. So that's a little too big, 46 square kilometers. We got to close this in a little bit. Now we're getting there. Even smaller. So about, we got to cut off Poltava if we're going to include this area up here. So that right there, according to the father, is an area that has cost Russia 6,000 losses over the course of the last 6 months. So now losses could be killed, could be so wounded that they can't come back into the fight. But just to give you an idea of how little territory we're talking about for the unimaginable losses being sustained by Russia. And I do want to mention, we talked about this in a recent interview with Ryan O'Leary when he was saying Ukraine needs to go after more of kind of the middle targets, 20 to, say, 100 kilometers behind the front lines. a lot of Western analysts, and put myself in the camp, thought that Russia would have been exhausted from this pace of casualties years ago. All right, so it's a shocking number at this point, but the Russian forces continue to advance. Every country has their breaking point. I think most expected that Russia's was some time ago, that we wouldn't get into the 20, 30, 40,000 Russian soldiers lost a month, but here we are, and they're continuing to attack. The father continues here saying, in conclusion, he called what's happening a crime, emphasizing that responsibility for such decisions is inevitable. Quote, I hope I explained to you clearly what the complaint is about. These are huge, monstrous losses in your unit. That is, it shows that you are incompetent. You don't know how to conduct combat operations, and you're hiding your incompetence behind the backs of soldiers and compensating for it with their lives. And you're afraid to write a report to your superiors. And this is generally what we're seeing. I mean, what he's describing is what we are continuing to see in video footage coming out from the front. Day in and day out, we're seeing individual Russian soldiers moving across, completely frozen, open terrain, one at a time, right? One, maybe two, every so often. And they're being hunted down and killed by Ukrainian drones. And when I said that their only real chance of survival is to be captured by Ukraine, is look at this footage, especially in the south, operating near Pokrovsk. I mean, at least in portions of the east, they're moving into, Kupiansk. We'll show some videos in a second. At least there's some buildings there that can maybe shelter you a little bit. But down here in the Pokrovsk sector, these guys are moving across open fields and trying to take shelter in tree lines. And if they don't get hit by Ukrainian drones, they're freezing to death. Hypothermia, frostbite, countless non-combat injuries. There is no place for them to warm up on the battlefield once they dismount from the Russian vehicles. In fact, we got a pretty interesting video that just came out yesterday showing, I guess we'll call it an assault buggy, an assault cargo truck of sorts. We'll play the clip right here. So this footage was released by the Ukrainian 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade. And there's some commentary on the Russian side saying, well, hold on a second. Maybe it's not as stupid as it looks, because that's a lot of rifles in the back that can try to shoot down a Ukrainian drone as it comes in to strike the vehicle. Maybe. I mean, this is the first one I've seen. And to be fair, it doesn't look like the vehicle gets hit on its way to drop off the soldiers. Military informant, a Russian mill blogger, and looking at this said, quote, another example of the Russian armed forces using an open-topped assault Ural buggy to deliver infantry to Ukrainian positions in the Zaporizhia direction. The vehicle is stripped of everything that could hinder the rapid dismounting of those sitting in the cabin in the cargo area, and the open top will allow those inside to provide dense fire against an approaching threat. However, in this case, the personnel can easily be hit by any means, including bullets and shrapnel. The use of such vehicles on the front line is direct consequence of the lack of a simple and cheap tracked forward edge BTR for delivering infantry in the troops, in groups. So we've not seen, and let's play this video out for a second, because you're going to see that the vehicle doesn't appear to get hit while it's dismounting the infantry. But what are they supposed to do once they get there, right? I mean, you've got Ukrainian drones watching these guys for a while as they approach this tree line, and then, as expected, the drones start coming in. There are, just in this short clip, appear to be bomber drones dropping munitions from overhead. There's no place for these Russian soldiers to hide. FPV drones coming in, and it does look like the vehicle is hit at this point. And then we've got artillery coming in, including those small little explosions you see in kind of a circular pattern. That is DPICM, or dual purpose improved conventional munition, cluster munitions. So you don't want to be anywhere near that thing. For soft-skinned vehicles and dismounts in the open, that is just shredding through people left and right. So again, you've got these Russian soldiers advancing. They're getting as fast as they can from the line to anywhere forward. It's not entirely clear. I guess they're just trying to get to this specific tree line. But once they're there, what do? There's nowhere to hide, and they can't even hunker down in the trenches for long periods of time, because if they start a fire, that opens them up to more attacks from Ukrainian drones. I'll say it again. Any Russian that is attacking right now, their only chance of survival is to be captured by Ukraine. Now, it's not just the Russians that are having to deal with the cold weather, of course. That is something that affects both sides in this fight. I would say right now that edge leans towards Ukraine, because most of their forces are operating in a defensive manner. They can have generators, they can have heat, they can rotate troops out, they can try to stay inside a lot more than these Russians advancing across open terrain. That said, it's still incredibly cold. So we just stood up a new fundraiser with Ukraine Frontline, which is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. So every one of your donations is fully tax deductible. We're aiming for $35,000 to pick up some vehicles and power generation. So generators to help these folks at the front stay warm. And specifically, who we're helping out here are some medics from the 3rd Army Corps operating in the east, as well as the 47th Mechanized Brigade, and then the GUR Legion. So the Legion operating under Ukrainian military intelligence. That is not the International Legion that was stood down. GUR Legion is very much still in the fight. In fact, we're talking to those guys right now to line up some interviews that we hope to share with you here in the next couple days or weeks. So for large donors, we've got this link in the description below, as well as the pinned comment. Large donors, $1,000 and up. We've got unit patches and signed flags. These guys need it, man. I mean, we're talking about how incredibly dangerous the cold weather is, and that goes across the entirety of the country, right? We're seeing reports day in and day out of power generation issues in Kyiv. So you can imagine as you move closer to the front, not just the fighting positions, but in this case, particularly the medics, they need help getting those generators up and running, and more generators to try to keep their patients and their soldiers warm. We're going to do everything we can to help. Now, on the fundraising front, we actually just got some pictures from the 6th Special Purpose Ranger Regiment of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, which is a mouthful. We hooked those guys up with 4 thermal optics a couple months ago, actually. It took a while to get the pictures kind of approved and sent back from those guys. But these are your donations at work. Thermals being used by the 6th Ranger Regiment, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces. Now, quick video I wanted to share here that just came out earlier today. It's wild, not a lot to add on this one, but it's a Ukrainian drone. This is from a Russian perspective. Ukrainian drone flying into the back of one of their trucks, but not detonating. Here you go. Give it a watch. I mean, that's wild, right? We've seen a bunch of footage at this point of that first-person view, well, of course, countless from the drone's perspective, but a lot from the soldiers as well, where they do actually intercept that drone at the last minute, or maybe it just flies off and impacts short or wide of the vehicle. That's pretty crazy, though, to actually land in the cargo area of the truck and not detonate. I didn't see the end of this video. You got to assume somebody's going up there at some point to make sure that the drone actually isn't going to detonate and maybe disarm it and get rid of it. Who knows? Maybe it actually blew up after it sat there for a period of time. But either way, pretty wild one there. And I did want to shift over to provide a couple different battlefield updates here. Kupiansk, we got some footage here showing what that city looks like right now, kind of being, I wouldn't say it's the focus of Russian and Ukrainian operations as of late. It has been the focus of Ukrainian counterattacks over the course of the last couple months. Russian mill blogger Two Majors here said, quote, "The Russian armed forces are using drones to thwart the counterattacks of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kupiansk region. Official reports are received, and the footage strikes on Canadian armored vehicles and pickups." I didn't see that. I don't doubt that exists. There's a lot of Russian drone strikes occurring in Kupiansk. I couldn't, in this report, he didn't link that video, and I was unable to find that video separately. So that's why we're not showing it on the screen here. He says that indicates the preservation of Ukrainian armed forces' potential for further local actions in the direction. Kupiansk itself is in a semi-ruined state, and the battle continues. And I think that's what you see in the video here is semi-ruined state is pretty accurate. And this is what happens. This is the method that Russia has gone about in taking these cities. They make them uninhabitable. I mean, right now, if you transplanted what you're seeing on this screen and moved it 200 kilometers west into a safe zone of Ukraine, relatively safe zone of Ukraine, do you see how long it would take for that to become inhabitable again? How much damage has been done? So even once the Russians are pushed out of this area, it's nowhere near livable. That's the damage they're bringing with them from the east. Now, shifting back over to the map here, there is an area we've not talked a lot about, but is getting a little more attention recently in the Leman direction, where it does look like Russia has made some progress in the last couple weeks. And I want to note that there's just not a lot of progress being made on the battlefield right now. Again, from the Russian perspective, what are they doing? Right? They're advancing out into sub-zero weather and hoping to survive for a couple days in a basement while they're being hunted by Ukrainian drones. That doesn't exactly make for rapid battlefield advances. We have in recent days other large Russian armored assaults where they try to push through. That's not any more effective now than it was over the last couple months when they're getting destroyed trying that exact same tactic. Outside of Kupiansk, Ukraine is not really carrying out any sort of significant counterattacks anywhere along the front. It is so incredibly hard to operate in this weather that this is kind of an understandable pace of operations. I would be surprised to see any large-scale movement here until, at the very least, until the snow starts to melt, but then you're getting into the mud season, and it's relatively hampered then as well. So for the time being, lots of drones, lots of long-range strikes, and then lots of Russian soldiers wandering out into the cold, and they're never going to return. Now, in the Leman direction here, I want to show you how this has changed over the course of the last couple months. We'll zoom out a little bit. Leman here, right in the middle of the map, to show you that there has been relative progress since December 1st. Again, it's hard to see. It's always crazy when you talk about progress and you zoom out a little bit, and then all of a sudden the map doesn't really move. So we're going to go in a little bit further here to Leman. Again, watch this northern area and this southern area here where you'll see a slight change from then to today. All right. So turning to a Ukrainian assessment here, this is coming from Bogdan Mirshinkov. It says the situation in the Leman direction continues to escalate. Logistics are worsening every day, and hostile small groups are constantly pressuring our defenses, both on the flanks of the direction and on the outskirts of Leman itself. The remnants of the Yempil bridgehead, so Yempil being here just a little to the southeast of Leman, are still partially controlled, but a withdrawal from there is fairly imminent prospect. So we're talking about this area here that is still technically listed as the gray zone, but in order to keep that resupplied, you're either moving through this very narrow gray zone or trying to maintain it from across the Donetsk River here. Of course, we know that's pretty challenging. Shifting up north, he says this area here, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, the Drobovsky Novosivelka area, he says has been somewhat stabilized. The enemy is not advancing in this area as rapidly anymore, and hostile groups are being eliminated. Zooming out, he says, in general, the situation in this direction is hanging by a thread because it only takes 1 to 2 tactical mistakes and everything will quickly escalate. And the important piece here I'd like to mention is just to the west, you've got Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. This is kind of the hub of keeping the fight operational in Donetsk. So as they move into Leman, you're seeing that this main road here, this main supply road from Izium down to Sloviansk, is getting closer and closer to Russian drone range. They're already able to range that, no doubt, with some of their longer range munitions and Lancets. It only takes a couple kilometers and they'll be able to, there's already reports today that Sloviansk itself is starting to see an increase in drone strikes, FPV drone strikes. As soon as this road comes under intense Russian drone fire day in and day out, it's going to spell potential disaster for the Ukrainian forces trying to hold Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. It won't be fast, but it's one of those things that makes it very, very challenging to keep up the defense as Russian forces advance near Leman. So while this is not getting a lot of attention, it is worth paying attention to the Russian advances in this area. Now, stepping back a little big picture, we have had some updates on the peace talk front, kind of. Listen, they're happening is kind of the update. All right. I don't think there's really any progress being made. The Russians don't really think there's any progress being made. Politico, we know that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff went to Moscow a couple days ago, their 7th trip to Moscow. Politico reporting on that said, quote, Ukrainian and Russian officials will meet next Sunday in Abu Dhabi for a new round of peace talks. After 2 days of meetings in the city this week failed to produce concrete results. They quoted one of the U.S. officials as saying, quote, President Putin said unequivocally that he wants to see a diplomatic settlement of this deal. And, we want to take him at his word. All right. They say U.S. officials said a big part of this week's talks focused on economics as well as who controls the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is currently controlled by Russian forces. The unnamed official is the one that said we want to take Putin at his word because we think Putin really wants peace. Of course, that's an unnamed official because I can't imagine anyone at this point actually looks at Russia's actions and Putin's actions and say they're being genuine in trying to pursue a peace deal. In fact, as this was going on, we heard people from across the Russian government say their core war aims remain. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson to the media, said that President Trump keeps on bending over backwards trying to find a solution in this war, and he said it's important that Russia doesn't bend. You hear this, right? So they're just kind of waiting for the United States to get on board with their demands, which, again, at this point, there's been no change. The biggest ones, we've talked about this repeatedly. Like, we can talk about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. We can talk about the economic rebuilding. We can talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine. We can talk about all of that stuff. The only two items that really matter at this point, because they're the two items that are not allowing either side to move forward in these negotiations, are territorial control and security guarantees. That's it. Those are the two things. Everything else is great. It's important. No doubt it's needed. But you can agree on everything else without the security guarantee and territorial control hashed out. These talks are I don't want to say wasted, because it's always good to continue the conversation, but like, those are the sticking points, and there's no indication those sticking points have been improved upon. In fact, the Russian side here, not very optimistic. Another mill blogger, Two Major, says, quote, "I'm tired of writing about negotiations. We consider hopes for a quick freezing of the conflict unfounded, and endless discussions about the next meeting and forecasts harmful to the morale state of the soldiers at the front. Let's assume that the war will be long." That tends to be the assessment from the Russian side. On the Ukrainian side, I see a lot of optimism. I think just a lot of the optimism is around like wanting to show that they want peace, and they are willing to talk and try to make arrangements to get from this point to that point. It's not even that on the Russian side right now. So no indication that this next round on Sunday is going to lead to anything tangible, but of course, we'll see. Now, longer term here, the Russians, Igor Girkin specifically, which, interesting character, right? Convicted war criminal responsible for the shoot down of, was it MH17 in Ukraine? It led to the death of hundreds of civilians. He is very pro-Russia. He wants Russia to win the war, but he continues to get more and more frustrated that they're not doing it the way that he thinks they should, really doubling down. He laid out some assessments, predictions for 2026 that he says he is absolutely sure of in the coming year. 1, a significant intensification of all sanctions up to a direct naval blockade. 2, a severe economic crisis. 3, the most fierce military actions with no guaranteed successful outcome. 4, constantly increasing air and sabotage terror in the deep rear. He says all of this and much more will lead to a gradual increase in confusion and social discontent with all of the numerous and unpleasant consequences. I don't think anything he said there is all that crazy, right? An intensification of sanctions, maybe. I mean, the U.S. has that sitting ready for President Trump to sign, and we're not making that move for whatever ridiculous reason, but we're right there. The talk of a direct naval blockade, of course, would be a pretty significant step. We did just see, like 48 hours ago, France, for the first time, interdicted a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker. We're kind of moving in that direction. Whether you call that a naval blockade or not, it's kind of, we're actually taking steps in that way. A severe economic crisis. Again, Russia has been, against all odds, able to keep their economy afloat for some time now. It's a ticking time bomb. I think a lot of folks underestimated the Russian resilience. I mean, I talked about underestimating their resilience to taking casualties. I think a lot of folks underestimated their resilience on the economic front. They've held out a lot longer than people expected. This is not a forever solution. What they've put together is not going to last indefinitely. There is a cracking point. Girkin thinks that it's coming this year. We'll see. In terms of fierce military actions with no successful guaranteed outcome, that kind of lines up with everything we've seen from the Russian side in the last 3.5 years. I mean, they haven't taken a major city. Most Russians right now, most Russians are pretty frustrated with the conduct of the war. When you get onto the Western pro-Russians, right, that are cheering on Russia from the safety of their home outside of Russia, they are bragging about Pokrovsk is the big victory in 2025, which isn't fully in Russian control now. It's the 72nd largest city in Ukraine. That's what they're hanging their hat on. So, yeah, more fierce military actions with no guaranteed outcome. Sounds kind of like what it's been for a while now. And then constantly increasing air and sabotage terror in the deep rear. 2025 saw some historic moments with the, I think, Operation Spiderweb striking the Russian nuclear fleet, the air fleet there, capable of carrying nuclear weapons. I think we're going to see more of that. Why not? We're seeing day in and day out more long-range Ukrainian drones striking deeper and deeper into Russian territory. There's no indication that's going to stop, not by a long shot. So Gherkin, as always, pretty doomer. But I think every one of his predictions is not a far cry from reality. We'll see how that plays out. But in the meantime, of course, we got our fundraiser in the description below. $35,000 for power generation and vehicles. Let's do what we can to help the GUR Legion guys and then the medics in 47th Mechanized and 3rd Army Corps. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.